Hi, I brought you inside today because I have some note cards and I wasn't sure I could handle those outside. Today I need to talk about this article that I keep mentioning to you, an integrative model for the study of developmental competencies in minority children. You've got a copy on Canvas. And this is the article that is written by actually it's about 25 years old and was written by a diverse group of authors whose names I'm just going to read because this sounds pretty diverse and exciting. Cynthia Garcia Cole, Gontran Lamberty, Renee Jenkins, Harriet Pipes McAdoo, Keith Krinick, Barbara Hannah Wasick, and Heidi Vasquez Garcia. So thanks to them for reminding us about looking at children and families with eyes wide open and with an understanding of the ecological systems theory of our good friend Bronfenbrenner. These authors say that the reason this study they've done is very important and needed is because there's a lack of research addressing the diversity and strength of minority populations. Their article considers social position and social stratification issues as being at the core of child development rather than as side issues. So you may have already heard this phrase before. I just want to review. Social stratification theory or theories are theories that refer to society's way of categorizing people into groups based on their socioeconomic factors, such as wealth, gender, race, income, education, occupation, and power. Our authors are suggesting that we keep these factors in mind when we're thinking about how children develop. I don't think I would argue with that. In fact, I think I'm saying thank you to them. And at the beginning of their article, they say there's a pattern of omission and neglect on the part of researchers who do studies that tend to just focus on what's going on in the lives of Caucasian children in the USA. So when we don't talk about all kinds of children and the forces that help diverse children develop and grow, then that's neglectful, they're saying, and we should do better than that. They say there's a lack of attention to the context in which development of minority children occurs. And the context they're talking about is the setting, or if you think about in Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, where we've got the microsystem and all the rings around it until we come to the outer section, which is the macro system. They are saying that the macro system includes some things that we need to keep remembering, such as societal racism, classicism, and sexism. I think we already know that, and I think I might pipe up on this topic fairly often, and I'm not going to say it every time you see me, but it's something we need to keep in mind. So they're saying, asking how is development affected by forces such as income, education, occupation, gender, power, and race? And if we were all together, I would ask you to give me some examples of how things like the gender of the caregivers of a child would affect how that child develops, or the financial condition of the family in which that child develops. How would that affect a child's development? I think we've talked about that before, right? So just to review, the authors say that early developmental theorists neglect to include stratification issues when they discuss typical or non-typical development of minority children. And the early developmental theorists they're talking about are those big boys like Freud, Piaget, Erik Erikson. Factors such as racism, prejudice, discrimination, oppression, and segregation should be considered when discussing the development of minority children. Seems like I've said that a couple times here. In non-white families, there is often an expanded role of family and kin networks that affects the development of minority children. That's a benefit. And these authors of this article are saying we should be talking about that because it can be very beneficial and usually is. And they're saying that because kinship groups outside of the nuclear family may be shaping the developing child so much, these factors may have a larger impact on children who are growing up in minority communities as opposed to children in the typical, as described by those big boys, Freud, Piaget, and Erikson, Caucasian families. The authors are not disputing the usual developmental theories of folks like Piaget and Erikson. They're just suggesting that we put more emphasis on the ecological systems theories of Bronfenbrenner and our friend Vygotsky, who talks about ZPD and scaffolding, the zone of proximal development, and my development is affected by who's around me and what they have to bring to me. So if I'm growing up in a culture that has a strong kinship community, I may be getting the advantage of what my auntie is teaching me and what my cousin who lives in my house is teaching me and what we've all learned from my grandpa who is the chief of our tribe. I may have all of that input, and that would be to my advantage. Where I, Lynn Sanner, grew up in a family with one dad, one mom, and some grandparents in another state. So my little area of who could affect my growth was not nearly as rich as it could have been if I had grown up in another setting. So what else? I think I've already said most of this. Beware, too, of theories. I didn't say this, but this is very important. It leads to the next thing that's got me revved up. Beware, too, of theories that promote racism and prejudice, such as the genetically deficient theory, and there is more than one the theories that talk about genetic deficiency, suggesting that differences in physical, intellectual, and psychological capacities between the races are innate. So you know this, I'm sure, and it's something that gives me some shame, just being a fellow human being. There are people that believe that there are differences between our races that will inform our physical and psychological and intellectual capability. I think you know how I feel about that. And that brings me to another reason I have to be cross, and I'm going to get over this by the time you see me the next time you see me face to face. But I just saw this in my news feed today. This is an article from Joss Dawsey and Jeff Stein, who reported in the Washington Post this morning about something that our president said during a press briefing at the White House yesterday, which was September 4th, 2020. He's moving to revamp federal agencies' racial sensitivity trainings, casting some of them as divisive and un-American, according to a memo by the White House Office of Management and Budget, which is sometimes called OMB. In the two-page memo, OMB Director Russell Vought says the president has asked him to prevent federal agencies from spending millions in taxpayer dollars on these training sessions. Vought says the Office of Management and Budget will instruct federal agencies to come up with a list of all contracts related to training sessions involving white privilege or critical race theory, and do everything possible within the laws to cancel those contracts. The memo released on Friday also tells all federal agencies to identify and, if possible, cancel contracts that involve teaching that America is an inherently racist or evil country. I'm not here to suggest that America is an inherently racist or evil country, but I think we have some problems about how we teach history and how we teach growth and development and how we look at education. And we have some problems in universities and public schools and churches and places of employment that don't promote equity and inclusion and celebrate diversity, and that makes me really sad. And a good thing, here I'll end on a good thing, and this is, it seems like I'm on a soapbox, doesn't it? I'm just on ordinary carpet. Our university, Miami University, is working in a totally different direction from this government we have right now that is canceling the race trainings the racial sensitivity trainings and the kinds of things that are suggesting we celebrate diversity and promote inclusion and equity. So I'm feeling pretty proud of Miami University and going to do my best to help with that. This doesn't seem like what I was going to say to you based on what I've said in the first 3 face-to-face recordings, and we'll be back to play some more when we get to Nugget Box 5. That's all. I really care about you. And I'm saluting you for helping me as we try to make our world a gentler and more inclusive one. Bye. Okay, so how did I do?